everyone that we are recording this meeting. So continuing to participate in the meeting constitutes your acceptance of being recorded. So welcome. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. And I'm sorry, but I know someone volunteered to take the minutes, but I'm forgetting. Laura, great, thank you. So our first item of business rather, is to take a motion to approve the minutes of the November 4th, 2020 meeting. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Great, so it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the minutes that were distributed in the call to meeting? All right, seeing none. Member Williamson?
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
And Mills, yes. So those are approved. We are now 1/3 of the way through our agenda. Next item on the agenda is the evaluation timeline and mid-year review. So, you know, while this is not atypical for our committee over the years, we of course had a little bit of a late start to getting the goals established for the year. As we know, we like to work backwards from our calendar such that the current sitting school committee has the opportunity to fill out the evaluations. Generally, we try and have that school committee also vote on the evaluations, although in my mind, that's maybe less important than everyone actually doing their contribution. Because it's a lot to ask of new people coming in, right, to fill out an evaluation when they perhaps have only been at a meeting. So that's kind of our beginning point, right, of working backwards, of saying, all right, well, if we're going to have to vote at an April meeting, right, we have to then step backwards to say, okay, this whole process needs to be done by the April time before the May elections. So that's one thing we need to think about tonight. The other thing we need to think about is what we're going to do for a mid-cycle review, right? Traditionally, the superintendent will we'll step away for a second. So traditionally, the superintendent will provide a summary of his progress towards his goals, at least, if not other indicator items, at a meeting in the winter. And school committee has, at least in the past few years, just given some feedback, right, at that meeting in a oral way rather than in some other sort of formal way. And I think we've often done that in December as a way to avoid the January meetings, which is, you know, budget oriented. I say that just by way of history, not by what we have to do this year. So I guess it opened the floor to thinking about, perhaps in the reverse way, introduce this. One, what we would think about for a mid-year evaluation, and then two, to kind of start thinking about some timelines for the spring. So I don't know, Daryl, if you wanted to maybe start off the conversation, and then we can go around the virtual room.
Sure. So thank you, Ken. Yeah, since we kind of just got this rolling, and some of these goals have, you know, starting times December, I think this might be a tough time to do kind of a mid-cycle right now. And I'm just putting it out there to all of you to kind of think about, because again, I don't want to put it out there thinking, you know, having people kind of get these updates, or it's more like an update associated with my goal, and have them think, oh, we're halfway through the year. Why aren't you halfway through this already? So there's some concern there on my part. I think again, I'm not sure how the whole budget process is going to roll out this year. It's definitely going to look a little different than it has in the past. But what we can do is look at, you know, I wouldn't mind having a January timeframe for this, where it's something that I put together, I write up, you know, we share it here, and then maybe it's a report back out at a formal school committee meeting. In the same way that I believe I did last year, but I did do it a little earlier. You're correct. And then that gives time for us to then go through. People can ask questions or just kind of make the comments, and I can take that feedback and roll it back into any modifications I need to make around the rest of the timeline so that everything looks like it's going to be somewhat complete in that April-May timeframe. You're on mute.
So Megan, since you're here, or maybe Daryl knows this, what are our January meetings? Because they're not on my calendars yet.
So actually, as of now, I think I only have one meeting in January scheduled. There actually might be two in January. There was one in November and one in December, which were problematic. January, I think, starts the 2-a-month schedule, which would be the 11th. No, the 4th and the 18th, if I'm not mistaken. No, because the 18th is Martin Luther King Day. So it'd be 4 and 25.
I think it's the 11th and the 25th.
11 and 25?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just pulled up Rebecca's calendar.
Okay.
Yeah, we generally try and avoid that right after New Year's so the central office can get the stuff out.
So it'd be 11 and 25 then.
So were you thinking of one of those meetings being a quote unquote budget retreat?
Yeah, we're going to have to do something. It's probably going to be one of the later meetings because, again, the hope is that we have FY21 by the end of December.
Yeah, and I don't think we will. So to be honest, with that type of scheduling, I would see a budget retreat almost being a special meeting the first week in February.
Sometime in then. Okay.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this at Business and Finance the other night in terms of, not knowing what you intended of having this is perhaps drifting from this one, but if we were going to have like a philosophical budget retreat, about what we've lost, what we might want to restore. But for the purpose of this, we have 11th and 25th. So if we aimed, which of those two do we want to be trying to aim for? What was the rest of the committee think about mid-cycle? Because we don't want to go too much later than January, because then we're getting too close to the end of year. Do other folks have any input into that? Yeah, I would throw out the 25th one if it was me, because this, again, a conversation for another subcommittee, but we might be back in school on the 19th, so you might be having some work to do on the 11th. I don't know.
I would find the 25th to be a better option also, just because we have our one meeting this month, and so then we come back on the 11th and have a meeting. But for the superintendent to make some progress and to be able to document that progress. Our upcoming meeting this month is the first meeting I've requested the superintendent to kind of delineate, the standards that his report aligns to in the way that we discussed last meeting. So this will only be one piece of evidence. So if we then go to like a mid-year on the 11th, he would only have 2 pieces of evidence for people to draw upon. And I don't think that's really satisfactory evidence for anyone to make a sound decision.
Sure. Of course, in fairness, the subcommittee's been asking for that for multiple years, but
we
so hopefully that'll happen now.
Tomorrow, right?
So if we did the 25th, that's a Monday. Daryl, you said you would want to have the opportunity to share that out with the subcommittee ahead of time.
Well, that's probably a good idea. I mean, I'm trying to recall how we've done it in the past. In all honesty, I can't recall right this minute. But even if I shared it I could share it with this group prior to in a draft form and just get some feedback from you, and you could respond to me individually. I think that would be fine if we don't want to hold another meeting. I'm just trying to remember how I did it last year and the year before last, in all honesty, Ken. And last year seems like 20 years ago. Yeah,
I mean, this committee doesn't often meet a lot until we get closer into the year. We usually meet a lot for the goals and then a lot towards the end of the year. It hasn't met a lot during the middle of the year. That may change this year. What does the committee think? Does the committee want to see this report as part of a meeting ahead of time? Or does the committee want to see it by date X to give feedback individually? What are folks' feelings about that?
I mean, I don't really have a strong feeling either way. Personally, I'm just chiming in to say so.
I think getting the written written report and then just giving individual feedback sounds fine.
I think one thing that I agree. The only thing a meeting does, and I don't think we need to have a meeting to do this, is give a deadline. So, I would think that for the committee's time to be actually valuable, you would need to get it to us by the 19th, because if people are going to actually look at it and make a suggestion, and then you're going to incorporate the suggestion and send it out for the meeting on the 25th, it seems hard to see how that would all cycle if we didn't get it, that Monday or Tuesday. Right. Because showing it to us on Friday, you might as well not, right? Because you wouldn't have any time to incorporate any feedback.
Right. So I just put that into the calendar, so that's ready to go.
So also, not to be a stick in the mud for you guys here, but how important is that January timeline? So like in my head, I'm also thinking if everything's been pushed back this year, the goals have been pushed back. I mean, if we did our first meeting in February. So Daryl, are you comfortable with that January date, or would you rather February?
What is that date in February that we're looking at?
You've got Rebecca's calendar easier than me.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at. I'm sorry. The first one is the 8th.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, to play devil's advocate to that, my concern is that you're getting close to the end of the year as we move into February, and an interim report isn't necessarily like we're not writing an evaluation based on that. It's an update, right?
There should be feedback provided so that the superintendent can make improvements over the second half. And the half is a weird word to use. So like that type of the year, right? So it's the before times, the now times, and then the now times. So I'm fine either way, but I just wanted to give the opportunity for you guys to think about that February meeting as well.
Wouldn't the earlier date for committee feedback be more useful than the later date, because you'll have a larger balance of time until the end of year? So just another piece to think about, I guess.
yeah, I could see it that way. So I had pulled up what I had done last year in terms of an update. So it's I should be able to do it within that time frame and get it out to you by that date. Especially with Rebecca kind of knocking on my forehead saying, okay, you got to get this done. She's very good at that.
So then that would be getting us something on 119 to present to the full committee on 125.
Yes.
Which wouldn't be us having a meeting, but would just be us, you sending us an email and us responding individually. Remember, it's not, blank carbon copy. Yeah. Not commenting on a Google sheet, but sending it back to you directly.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. In terms of if you have Rebecca's calendar in front of you, what is our last scheduled meeting? Is it in April? April 26th. So that feels like a month where we might have 2 meetings.
It is.
Yeah.
And we have no meetings scheduled in May yet.
All right. So April 12th, probably, unless that's Easter or something, and April 26th.
Yeah, April 12th.
Yeah. So, traditionally we would have the April 12th meeting be the one where you are presenting your evidence, right?
Yes.
And the April 26th meeting being where we're voting on on that, right? So that would mean that we would have to have meetings ahead of April 12th to set up the instrument that we'd be using to collect feedback, because we often present the instrument at that April 12th meeting. So you would present your evidence, myself or maybe Megan would present the structure of what we're going to do time-wise, and show Barry's Google form, and then they would have a week, I presume, to fill it out, and then we would probably have to have 2 meetings that other week to process the writing the report to get it out by that weekend. This is always very tight.
So that if you want to get this done by the 26th, the week before that is break.
Ooh,
I think
yeah.
we ran into that last year as well.
We did. So the week of 19th is April vacation. Yeah. And people.
The one piece of flexibility that we've kind of learned in now times is additional school committee meetings. So we can even do, if we had to, a Monday, Wednesday that final week, a Monday, Thursday that final week, if we needed an additional meeting space.
Yeah, because if we.
So Ken, if you go back, and so what we're going to need is like that drop dead date when you need all my information completed, correct?
That's what I want us to be thinking about, right?
Right. So we have to look at that, whether or not it's that the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, because what you already said, you're going to need time to pull everything together. And then that information would get shared with a school committee on the 12th. It doesn't have to be shared on the 12th. I think last year, I'm trying to recall, but I thought it might have even been the day after.
I think it was probably the day after.
Right. So if it goes out on the 13th and you give people 3-4 days, I'm not sure, maybe more. That's the only thing is trying to pull this group back together to kind of compile the information, and then Megan would write it up with Ken. So
yeah, I mean that intervening April vacation is a problem. I mean, to me it's sort of irrelevant because I don't have April vacation that week, and I could of course meet. That may not be true for everybody in the committee though.
No, and I kind of caution against it. I know most committee members have children in the district, so that's time well spent with family.
Yeah.
I think we were able to do it easily last year, Ken, because no one was traveling.
Yeah, which hopefully will be the case this year. But the other option, and with Megan here online too, is to ask, do we need to vote on this before the committee is over, or do we just need to get everybody to fill out their evaluation before the committee turns over?
So there's really 2 ways to look at that. Technically, no, right? A new committee could be responsible for voting on it with the old committee's feedback, but just from my personal, moral, and ethical point of view, I don't think that would be a way that I would like to run a committee. I don't think that's fair to new members who have no idea who Daryl is, or the processes that we went forward with. So it would be my 100% staunch view that we as a committee complete the evaluation cycle.
Then we probably would need a special meeting,
That's fine.
I suspect, to vote on it, because I just don't see how it works, because then you're starting to push back into March or really early April, and there's just not going to be time for him to do anything.
No, I agree.
So the first,
I mean, I think the cycle kind of, I think the first town meeting, Rebecca just sent that out.
Yeah, it's the election day.
The elections are the 10th, so we do have the first week of May if we need it.
Yeah.
That's.
It seems like we do.
I think we do. I think you could probably, again, push it off to the 3rd, the 4th, you know, the week of the 3rd of May.
I would say the week of the 3rd of May would be the best. So you would do it May 3rd, a special meeting on May 3rd before the May 10th election.
So just
kind of like a lame duck session, but an option.
The other thing, I don't know how this matters for time, Daryl, but that's when town meetings begin. I believe Sterling's and Paxton's, they're usually that Tuesday, right? Of that first week.
You know what? Linda, I just looked at they're actually the 3rd, so that doesn't even
they're the Monday.
Yeah. So
well, we could do it May 4th.
Yeah, I mean, because elections aren't going on, we could do it on the 4th.
Star Wars Day is allowed, I suppose. It's nice to have a meeting, right? So if we did the May 4th special meeting just to vote on it, if we don't get quorum or something, then we just might have to have the new members do it. New members can just abstain, right, if they don't feel comfortable voting. But I still think we should set to our cycle of discussing it on April 12th, so that then we can meet the week after April break, right? Which is the week of the 26th.
Yes.
To do our business, right? So if we met if we gave people until, we could even almost give them till April 25th at that point, right? To fill out their evaluations. I don't know.
Does that seem as like a long time?
It does, but the whole week is April break, so people are going to complain if they have to do something over April break.
Okay, that's true.
I think it's either before April vacation or after. I don't know what people think.
I mean, it's however long it's going to take you to get together to really compile everything and pull together the responses. I think that's really the hard part. And I've never been involved in that. So,
I mean, what we did last year was we split it up so that coming into the meeting, we had each taken a section. So we came to the meeting with material, which is of course an argument for, not needing really even more than one meeting, as long as we discussed all the drafts and Megan felt good about the feedback to pull the final thing together. We could, if we said it was due the 25th, we could meet on like the 27th or 28th, in kind of a marathon section. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that kind of comes down to the feeling of the committee as well. So I'm kind of wrestling with that even for Monday, whether it's better to have a marathon session or we break it into 2 meetings. So I really, Kelly and Laura and Linda, your feedback is like super, super important. Yeah.
So this is the first time I've been on the subcommittee. So when you say about having the section ready, that's from everybody in that one. So collating all the responses for one section and having the pie charts and all of that ready to discuss. So,
right.
So you're saying that if everybody submits those by April 25th, then we would have that section ready on the 27th or 28th?
Yeah. So like, just gonna kind of like talk through the way it kind of looks. Ken and I have been doing this for a few years. So it's nice with the Google Forms. So you'll get like, if we divide up section 1, 2, 3, 4 and goals. So say Kelly, you're in charge of section 2, you'll get the ratings with the pie chart, right? Which is like an easy copy and paste, but then people's comments. So typically what like we do is I'll copy and paste all the comments into a single Word doc and then look for commonalities. So most of the time things kind of mesh up, and then kind of copy and paste kind of like a puzzle together, and then trying to turn it into one voice. And that's the hardest part, is like you have 20 voices in this narrative. You're going to turn it into one voice for section 2, as will Laura and Linda and Ken. And then at the end of the day, I turn your 4 voices into a single voice for the end report.
So how long?
You're not really writing as much as you're copying and pasting.
Okay, because that was just my concern, is turnaround time from.
No, it's pretty. I would say it would take me an hour and a half, maybe total, because everything's there. You're not adding your own spin. You just have to be careful to include everyone's voice, especially even if there's one person that has like a comment that doesn't match anybody else's. I always try to give that person their voice in a separate paragraph. But it's mainly copy paste and to make sure your pronouns are consistent and your tenses are consistent.
Right, and coding for yeah.
I mean, we can give folks whatever deadline we want that's in advance of when we need it, because in theory, if we send it out on the 13th, they have the week before April break to do it as well, right? So it could be due Saturday or something, or Friday, I don't know, whatever, because we'll see the Google sheet and we can get access to it, I believe, right? So that we can like see it in real time.
Okay, no, that was just my concern about that turnaround time, not having done the process before.
So if we talk about it on the 12th, have a meet, get the material on the 13th, when do we want to make it due?
Ken, you could have it due in April break, but people that put it off to the very end are going to put it off to the very end no matter what. So I just have it due on the 24th. That maybe that the 23rd, which is a Friday, or the 24th, to maybe give you time on the weekend to pull it, to work on it or take a look at it, rather than trying to do it at night. That's a lot of time for them to do this.
Yeah, I usually it's like a
5-day turnaround.
4 or 5 days.
Yeah, it's usually a lot less than that.
Yeah.
Than what we're proposing. Yeah. I think what happened last year was it was due like that following Monday, and then you all met during break.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we met during break last year, just because
there wasn't.
We didn't have a lot of.
It really wasn't a break. You know?
Right.
Yeah. And there was actually no break. Like the break was canceled, right? So it didn't really much matter. So if we have it due April 23rd by noon, say, I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to be in your office anyway, but as long as we have access to it, even if just Megan or I are allowed to have access to it as it goes along, we can then, as long as one of us has control, we can send it out once it's all in. Well, I'll have to send a reminder, a couple times in that process to make sure that people are doing it. And then what day would we want to meet the following week? The 26th week, I mean.
7th, just so that in case we need more time, we can.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of that, but
Tuesday.
So that would be Tuesday the 27th. And And that gives you time to either ask individuals of us if like, oh yeah, I need you to do a little bit more work on that, or to pull it together in advance of being able to get it into out to everybody to consider before we would have a special meeting on the Tuesday.
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Okay. All right. So then, working backwards, if April 12th is the day that the meeting where we're going to discuss it, we probably have to have a meeting the week before to preview the, Daryl can always edit some of the text, up till the last minute, I suppose, but to preview the Google sheet, right? So
We could do the 6th or the 7th.
yeah, we could.
I mean,
Do people have a preference of those? That's Tuesday or Wednesday.
either works for me.
Yeah, either
How about-
works for me. I'm whatever you guys need. I am here to help. So
Wednesday is better for me in the spring than Tuesdays because I teach late on Tuesdays, but
Yeah, Wednesday is good then. Works for me.
so the agenda there will be reviewing what Barry. So Barry will hopefully have things done by then with all the indicators loaded.
Right. So you'll have to have, again, Barry will have to sit down, I think, no, he'll know. He'll get all that from Rebecca. We'll get that rolling.
I mean, all he's got to do is delete last year's and add in this year's indicators, right? I'm not saying all, like it's not a lot of work. I'm sure it is, but
yeah. No, he loves doing that stuff.
And then we had the hot link so that you could see the rubrics, so that people could.
Yeah, he'll do all that.
All right, so that's a lot of meetings. As you feel your life slowly.
Sure. But you guys have like nothing in December after this?
Well, not yet. It's already December.
I'm looking
have
at
something in December.
I'm putting on my Zen glasses. My Zen glasses are on.
So just to be clear that I've not missed any dates or deadlines, could somebody just make sure that we clarify them? Maybe in chronological order.
Yeah, I was trying to do that same thing as we were talking because I'm not 100% sure what we all agreed on here.
Captured, and maybe you could tell me.
Yes, please.
All right. So I have, speaking of the end of the year only, okay, I think we have an April 6th meeting to review the indicators and the evidence.
I think that's
Right.
the 7th is the Wednesday.
April 7th, yeah.
7th, okay, good. And then we have a meeting on the 12th.
That's a school committee meeting.
That's a full school committee.
Right.
And then hold a subcommittee meeting to review the final evidence and information on the April 12th. Okay, so I'm all messed up here.
So I think what we said was that April 7th, we were going to meet to review what Daryl was going to show on April 12th, right?
I got it.
Daryl's we're going to describe the application at the April 12th full committee meeting. On the 13th, it'll go live. He'll send his document and we'll make the Google Sheet live. We'll make it due April 23rd at noon. We will then meet on April 27th with drafts already sent ahead of time so that we can go over them. And then if she so pleases, the chair will call a special meeting on May 4th to vote on the on accepting the evaluation.
Okay, very good. Cindy.
And then back into January, right? I wrote down, of course, I wasn't taking great notes.
That's what where minutes are very important tonight.
Well,
Yeah.
I've got those as well. Do you want me to repeat what I heard?
Yes, if you could. Yeah.
The subcommittee agreed that we are looking to have a mid-year review report reviewed by the subcommittee by January 19th.
Right. And we're going to do that just by email.
By email. I will add
Right.
that detail, right? By email.
Right. And obviously just, back to Daryl directly, like no deliberation.
No deliberation. And then the subcommittee to review and respond with feedback to be able, so that he can incorporate that feedback prior to the January 25th school committee meeting. So I'm not sure that I have a deadline for our feedback to him.
Probably ASAP, right? In terms of, yeah. All right. So Daryl, do you need a meeting for us to discuss with Barry the whole structure of that thing, or is that something he and Rebecca can?
Yeah, I
handle?
think he and Rebecca should be able to get through it since they've done it a couple times already.
Okay. Does everybody feel okay with this in terms of process? And we've shared the indicators with the committee, have we not?
I believe we did when we went over the goals, but it was pretty quick. So
Yeah, I wasn't there that meeting, so.
I would recommend resending that. So Daryl, actually, when you send your report out tomorrow or Friday, I know you're going to kind of indicate the indicators within it. If you would have like a paragraph stating which indicators we're focusing on, that would be really helpful.
And if you can maybe include as an attachment the whole superintendent's rubric thing that has all of them, just so that maybe if I talk over it at the subcommittee report, I can say, Daryl put this in his report, but just also to your attention, we included the document, particularly for newer members who maybe have never done this before. I get the sense y'all did that kind of late at night, that meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
So are there other things people want to talk about under this agenda item?
Ken, I don't know if this is when you might want to talk about it, but I had asked you about if it would be worthwhile to talk to MASC about doing a review of the evaluation training for the full committee.
That's a good question. Megan, a couple of years ago, Tracy came out and gave a talk as like under the chair's remarks, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, not everything she said was completely right, but I'm sure since then it's probably improved. Is that something you'd be interested in? As
I would be. In last year's MASC conference, they actually had a really well done subsection regarding kind of the process that we go through. We're actually, and again, I don't think we tip our hats very often. We're ahead of most districts in the Commonwealth. Typically, districts are still going through all standards and all indicators. And the process that we go through is something that's lauded. But I think we also have a ton of new members who may not understand the processes as well as those who've been on the committee a long time. So I would definitely be in favor, maybe kind of in the March month where things are budget related and super focused on dollars and cents. It might be a nice way to break up those budget meetings.
Sure, I think that'd be really good. Is that something you can reach out to MASC?
Yeah, I'll put that on my to-dos for March.
My suggestion is that you give them a time,
Yeah.
like a time limit for how long you want the presentation to be.
He tends to talk ad nauseum, so I would think like a 15 to 20 minute presentation would be plenty.
Yeah, and that allows time for questions. You know, if they talk for 45, 50, 60 minutes like they did last time, then people aren't going to ask questions.
No, 15 to 20 would be ideal for myself.
Yeah.
If that's okay with the committee, unless you want more. I'm still trying to get Ken's record of the longest meeting ever.
Yeah, I wasn't chair. It was Lance's meeting, but I was there.
I'm close. We went past. I got a new record for myself last meeting when you weren't there.
Yeah, Daryl probably definitely remembers my longest meeting. I think that was 12:45, was it?
Yeah, it was after midnight.
Yeah. All right. So we don't need to repeat that.
No.
No, but I'll reach out to Glenn and Tracy this week.
Great.
Yeah, because Ken, I believe Glenn did it once as well, correct?
He did. Yeah, Tracy did it more recently, but
Yeah, he did.
but Glenn did it as well.
Okay.
I think either way, I'd still have that same advice.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Good. So our next item, is anybody else, I'm sorry, is there anything else under that agenda item? Our next item was discussion of 360-degree feedback process. So we've kind of hemmed and hawed about this. You know, again, to put it in context, when the committee, you know, negotiated its new contract with the superintendent, one thing that some committee members felt pretty strongly about was, you know, carving out the possibility for having other, you know, feedback mechanisms. So I don't want to just let it die on the vine. One thing that, so what I did very briefly was, you know, search the internet and found that Qualtrics had right on their main webpage an example of 360-degree feedback. So my impression from their website was that that was not proprietary. Something that if we used it, we should probably check with someone. But it was out there, right? It wasn't like it was. I had to put an email address in, but it was publicly accessible. And I kind of just wrote their questions and kind of tweaked them to be, you know, superintendent, educator, evaluation. And then on their website, or something I downloaded when I gave them my email address, was also kind of like a pros and cons of doing 360-degree feedback, which is actually pretty similar to what the Hanover report said that we've discussed before. You know, some of the cautions, some of the advantages of doing this feedback. So I tried to create, well, I did create a document that I thought was, you know, at least somewhat education centric in terms of leadership questions that in my mind would go to, not saying we have to do this, but are kind of not really teacher questions or parent questions. They're more like direct report questions, right? Than secondhand report questions or community member questions. So at one point, the committee had talked about trying to pilot a small scale 360-degree. At some point, the committee talked about not doing it. So I just bring this out here as a means to have as something to respond to, both for Daryl to respond to and everybody else on the committee to respond to. So I'll be quiet. Unless nobody says anything, and then I won't be quiet, and I'll just keep talking.
You know, I certainly want to honor what previous committees have, you know, have put into this, and you know, their recommendation for trying to find other methods of receiving feedback. You know, I think I'd like to see if we're going to move in this direction, you know, really make it a pilot of, you know, us looking at, you know, questions and process and that type of thing as our main focus to get started. Just, you know, because of what I read about, you know, the cautionary tales of not doing this during times of turmoil. You know, if a global pandemic isn't time of turmoil, then I don't know what is. So, you know, I think it's, and maybe we can look at it as, you know, this gives us an opportunity to make sure we're doing it the right way, really vetting the questions and, really making the process what we want it to look like before it's really incorporated.
Kelly, I think that's really incredible feedback. And I wonder if, if you guys brought a report to the whole committee saying that you had a processes that you would like to implement in the 2021-2022 school year, if that would be amenable to them. Just saying like, okay, we spent the last few months really researching. It's not done many places, but we think we found a mechanism that could work. But it's been recommended across the board that it should not be implemented in times of crises. So we would like to implement this in the following school year, pending your feedback.
Linda, Laura, what do you think?
I think that it makes sense that to really focus on the pilot aspect of it versus just blindly going into it, especially in this year of all years. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot that you can learn about, in a time like this, but to start a process now just seems foolhardy. So, but I think looking into ways that we can take aspects of it in the next year, I think. I mean, my biggest question is how to do that responsibly. Would we need to start pulling in those questions of how to do this process? Should we be doing that now? And if so, how do we do that in a way that doesn't give an impression that we are asking for 360 feedback now versus piloting the process? I think that would be one of the big questions of how to be sure that that's crystal clear.
If I can jump in real quick, Linda, that's a good point. I think one of the things that we might be able to do is look at what the questions are. So perhaps putting it back onto, if we're looking at administration, if we're looking at, my central office staff who work directly with me, building principals, we could go through and look at the questions and pose those questions, not look for responses from them right now, but just say, hey, what questions might actually elicit some responses that might help us formulate, ways in which to improve the person sitting in the superintendent's office, or whatever it is, the mechanisms associated with the position and so forth. But I think that might be a really good way to do it, because it would also, I think, give them the opportunity to feel as though they're involved in this, and they have the opportunity to have kind of a say in how the whole process works out. Not that they wouldn't ultimately when they're putting in their responses, but what would allow them to really be able to put some information out there that would be beneficial.
Too, that if that idea of getting their input to the questions, because they're going to know what they can speak to and what they can't. And if we show them questions and they say, you know what, I really wouldn't even know how to know that, that's good for us to know. But even if we wanted to have them try out answering the questions, that doesn't, if it's part of a pilot, that the responses don't necessarily, I wouldn't think, have to go beyond this committee, because the responses aren't part of the evaluation. It's part of evaluating our pilot and evaluating our questions, which would kind of keep that out of this evaluation cycle.
I'm not 100% sure that's really just legally true, though. I think if we're discussing something that are documents at a public open meeting, I don't really know that we have a lot of ways to have them not be part of the public record. I don't know what to think a little bit. I will say I don't mean this as any means of disrespect to the folks who are exec reports, but typically in the world outside of where I work, like not in higher ed or secondary ed, but in like the real world, we'll call it, boards of trustees don't really, or boards of office, boards of directors don't really ask the subordinates for their opinion on what they're going to be asked. It almost isn't really a fair question. It's really a management question in my mind, of what questions should be asked, not really a downstream question. I want to get their feedback, but like the questions that I piloted, like there's no way they can't answer them. Like they're really asking about like their experience, right? And they can always just say no means for observation or something. And I'm kind of curious as to what people mean by pilot. Like if we're giving a sample document and actually collecting feedback, I feel as though it's public information. So I worry what a pilot really means. Like if we want to like hone over the questions and we want to hone over the method and we want to come up with a calendar and we want to do that work this year, I think that's fine. I'm just reluctant to ask the feedback of the people we're eventually going to ask to take the 360. I'd rather ask a consultant, if we're going to do that, who actually knows how to do this, rather than asking the folks who are going to be asked to fill it out. I mean, I don't know. But what do people mean by pilot? Are they thinking that we're going to ask some people the questions, or?
So, what's in Ken, I was thinking that, as well, which was why I was not, when I thought about it, having them look at the questions, because everything that we talk about, everything that we put out there is public record. It's all part of the public domain. So that isn't necessarily a pilot in that sense. So I think if we're looking at and maybe it's something where this group gets together and looks at the questions and says, okay, here are the questions that we think, over time, and we go through a process, we look at it because we all want to kind of come to some type of agreement on this, then that becomes what's utilized in the fall. Just my humble opinion.
I mean, we can do that work throughout the rest of this year. I think, as Gerald says, one thing is review the questions, right? So that was kind of my intent if we would do that tonight, since we had pre-circulated it. But if people don't want to do that, we can wait. I think there are also some legal questions that we would have to get feedback on. If we distribute, and I don't know if Megan, if you would want to ask Naomi this or whatever when you're bothering about something else, but if we distribute a questionnaire to employees, right? How do we do that in such a way that their anonymity is protected? Because if it's online, there's IP addresses.
I mean, it would have to be the old-fashioned paper way, kind of like a Scantron type of thing.
Yeah, or just like handwritten and put in a box, right? But those documents, like, I don't think we don't have to share them, but they're part of the public record, right? So they would be subject to a public records request.
Stored, right? So those documents would then be stored.
They would.
Mm-hmm.
So we could write a composite that we would share.
Correct.
But we would have to, on a public records request, we would have to share those source materials, I would think.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere in central office, they would have to be in some sort of suppository in case there was a request.
Yeah. So I think that's something that would have to be really well thought out, because if you're going to get meaningful feedback, people have to feel they can be honest, but yet protected.
It'd be easier. I mean, obviously it's easier online no matter what. But we could, as a school committee, look into using a mechanism like SurveyMonkey, things that are not Google Forms, that don't take your email address. I mean, obviously the IP address, like if you really back channeled it and had all the money and time in the world, you can probably figure out from where it originated. But at least using a mechanism other than Google Forms would be one step to protecting people's privacy.
Yeah. And the other just process question that I think we need to discuss at some point is, they don't work for us. So we can distribute a flyer all we want, but there is a chain of command question that I think we need to discuss and look at policies about in terms of what we can actually ask staff to do directly. Like, so is this the superintendent asking for their evaluation? Is this us asking for their evaluation? That's not clear to me.
I don't think it could be Daryl, to be honest with you, from an ethical point of view, because when he asks his employees of things, it's something they're expected to do. And if they do not accomplish the task, and then they're being insubordinate. If it's something that we are requesting they are doing, we're a different body and we are technically the boss of the superintendent. So they would complete a task for us under their desire to. Doesn't mean they have to. It means that they can choose to do so. Which may skew our data, right? But at least may provide a more authentic response than if it came from central office.
So if we were to plan a meeting for some of our in-between time to discuss this further, what would be our objectives for the meeting this year so that we only have to do this once and then it can be ready to go in summer, fall, whenever we would maybe want to execute this?
That I had read were the ones that were specific to superintendents was having the questions ready to present to so that the superintendent was aware of them sometime around June, so that the questions that were going to be asked could be incorporated into potential goals for the next school year. So I think, if we don't want to call this a pilot, we want to call it maybe the creation of the process and really outlining the process and defining it. Then we could set a goal for ourselves of having the questions vetted and defined and approved for June or next year.
And by the terms of Daryl's contract too, he does have to agree to this. So it's not like we're just implementing it, right? So it's something we'd have to come to an agreement on. If we met sometime where people could maybe have either looked at the questions that I sent around, which I will claim no ownership of. It's not my intellectual property. I just messed around with some questions from Qualtrics's website. And come with suggestions, including Daryl, right, about which ones are good, what's missing, what's good, what's missing, what needs to be improved. We could wordsmithy potential questions at a meeting, as long as we've done some pre-work. Megan, at some point, maybe you and I could touch base either at management or offline about one of us reaching out to what questions we might have for council with regards to details around this process. I mean,
yeah, I just think it really needs to be cleaned up a bit. So, I mean, when you guys kind of develop a processes, something that's really systematic, because I think what's also important is whatever you guys decide upon needs to be able to be replicated. When we talk about these kind of systems and school systems, right? And Kelly's nodding, she's like, oh, I've heard this term before, right? Like whatever systems we develop have to be replicated with people that are not us. So saying none of us are here next year, like worst case scenario, those who are in our roles need to be able to replicate whatever we are putting forward. So having some sort of document in hand is super helpful. Once we have that document, then we can go to, the attorneys and say, this is what we have. What do we need to do legally in order to move this forward?
So I could propose it for our next meeting. My homework could be to write a process document that, hearing Kelly's suggestion of trying to do it in June, could be what we could target around. Just for feedback, like a draft. If everyone else's homework could be to really tear apart the questions I put out there Maybe you find a better source. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not, including Daryl to look them over, so that we can go through some of these questions. And as you said, it could inform goals. Again, I didn't go against goals. I just went against a professional 360-degree review. In my mind, 360-degree reviews aren't really like evaluating, is he meeting his goals? They're evaluating leadership, right, generally. So I kind of think those questions are the ones I chose, right? The ones that are, do you make me a better employee? Do I feel supported? Do I feel there's lines of communication? Am I respected? Like those leadership attributes that that they can speak to, right? We can see if he's accomplishing his goals. We don't need their help for that. So I think we want to ask questions that they can help us see things we don't see, and to help Daryl see things where he could improve his professional practice, right? Or see strengths in his professional practice that he could build upon. So when would we want to do that, I guess is the question. We have a meeting on April 7th, and aside from some homework to do, we don't have a meeting between now and then, right? So I would propose we meet in March, just so we can get an update on where everything is in terms of the things for April, as like agenda item 1, and agenda item 2 being questions and process for 360. I don't know what people think about that. I'll take the deafening silence as I've either disconnected or no one has any opinions about that.
March sounds good.
Can you repeat that, please? Because I'm not sure that I caught that.
I was suggesting that in March we meet to discuss just a check-in, like on how is all the other stuff going, like everything that's going to happen in April, and then to have wordsmithy the questions and review whatever document I create to talk about a potential process. And Megan, I may share that with you ahead of time to see if you think it's something we can get some feedback from council, just so we don't have to meet again.
That's totally okay.
Yeah. So if we did March, days just blend together. They're all kind of equally whatever.
Do you want to do the 22nd or earlier?
I don't think it really much matters.
No. Okay.
What do people think about the 22nd? That's on Monday.
Yes.
6:30. Is that generally okay for all of our meetings that we did dates for but not times?
Yes.
We can always change it, or when some other committee schedules counters us with another meeting, we can always scooch earlier or later. But this is like the Bob Imber level, reserving subcommittee dates ahead of time process.
Bob just takes that hour before every meeting, every school committee meeting. He knew how to do it.
So is there anything else we as a subcommittee need to be doing that I'm not thinking of?
I would just say those check-ins can kind of like, and I'm happy to be responsible for that, just reminding Daryl to put in those indicators into the superintendent reports.
Yeah, please do.
And I'm happy to be the nag on that one.
And what's helpful about that is because again, Rebecca will get the outline started, and I'm usually just in cruise control when I'm doing those things. So if it's not in there, I won't.
I'll be the nag on your shoulder.
Yep, thank you.
I've proven myself to be ineffectual at making that happen. So, so I think it's better if you try.
That's more me than anybody. It's definitely me.
All right, so So we have work on the 19th. Again, we need to be careful not to violate the open meeting law in that work. And then we have March 22nd, April 7th, and then April 27th as our meetings. Okay.
Pending pandemic 2.0 looks good.
Bite your tongue. Bite your tongue, please.
I know. Well,
Well, I
we
think
had the highest numbers yet today.
I saw that, like double, like 4,000. 4,000. It's not good.
And then Thanksgiving messes up data all over the place too, just like Labor Day did.
Mm-hmm.
So
We got the Thanksgiving data yet.
yeah, some of those big numbers today might have been delayed statistics from the fact that people didn't get tested, on the weekend. But yeah, it's still a big number. But that will be a conversation for a different subcommittee to have. All right, so we kind of blended into our next item on our agenda, which was next meeting. So I think we've done that work. So is there any March 22nd? Yeah. So is there other business that people want to put before this subcommittee? All right, well, seeing none, I will take a motion to adjourn. It's been moved, and has it been seconded?
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. So, Laura?
Yes.
Okay. Linda?
Yeah.
And Kelly, are you still there? Okay.
She said yes.
She said yes. Okay, I didn't hear. That's good. So Williamson yes, and Mills yes. So we are adjourned. So thank you so much for coming together, and I will see you virtually soon.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good night.
Thanks.